to Storytime with Renu. Today I have a very interesting story for you and it's called The Thrifty Tailor. Now this story can be told with a piece of paper and I'm sure children will enjoy doing it because it's got an activity involved in it. So here goes. Once upon a time there lived a tailor who was very poor. He was a men's tailor and he stitched the best coats and pants and shirts for men. All the rich people in that town came to him to have their coats and jackets and shirts stitched. He was so poor, he never had enough money to buy himself a good piece of cloth. He had to make do with a very old jacket that one of his customers had given him. One day, one of his favorite customers walked in and gave him a parcel. He said, "This is a gift for you from my family. You've been stitching coats for my parents, grandparents, for me and my family. So we thought we should give you a gift." When the tailor opened the parcel, it was the best piece of cloth that he had ever seen. He thanked the customer and after he had left, he continued with his work. And that night, as soon as he had finished all his work, he took out that piece of fabric and felt it once again. It was so soft and felt so warm to the touch. He didn't waste any time in making a coat for himself. But he knew he had to be very, very careful. So he took out a pair of scissors, folded the cloth very, very carefully, and then he started to cut. He had to be really careful. He didn't want to ruin the cloth. Cut out the neck part. Then he went on to cut the sleeves. Then he cut the rest of the cloth. You have to be very, very careful. And now he stitched it with very neat stitches. And finally, he had a beautiful coat to wear. He wore it every time he went out. He wore it when he went to the market. He wore it when he went to the grocery store. He wore it when he went to visit his friends. And he wore it when he went out for long walks. And so he wore it and wore it and wore it and wore it. And one day, when he was putting on his coat, he noticed that the bottom of the coat was very dirty and muddy and it had torn in bits. So he decided that he should stop wearing that coat. But when he looked at it, he realized there's still lots of good fabric left in it. So out came his scissors and he started to cut. Once again, he cut very, very carefully. And then he stitched it up. And now he had a beautiful jacket to wear. And once again, he was very proud of his jacket. And he wore it every time he went out. He wore it and wore it and wore it and wore it. Till one day, when he was putting it on, pop, pop, both his elbows popped out of the jacket. He looked at it. He felt very sad. But it still had lots of good fabric in it. Out came his scissors and he started to cut. He cut very, very carefully and stitched it up with the neatest of stitches. And now he had a vest to wear. And he wore the vest wherever he went. He wore it and wore it, wore it and wore it. Till one day, when he was passing by, he stopped to look at himself in the shop window. And he realized that the vest had become so loose, baggy and saggy. So when he went back home that evening, he decided it was high time that he stopped wearing the vest. Then once again, he looked at it. Remember, he was a very thrifty tailor. And he thought, there's still lots of fabric left in this. What can I make with it? Once again, he took out his scissors and he started to cut. And what do you think he got this time? He got a very nice hat and he wore it on his head. And every time he went out, he put on that hat. And he wore it and wore it and wore it and wore it, wore it and wore it and wore it. Till one day, when he put it on, it came slipping over his eyes because it had become so loose. What to do now? There's still some good fabric left in it. So he took out his scissors and he started to cut. Very, very carefully. Now what do you think he had? He had a tie and he put on that tie wherever he went. And he wore it and wore it and wore it and wore it till one day when he was putting it on, he got an awful smell. And when he looked down, the tie had so many stains on it. Soup, sambar, rasam, sauce. No wonder it smelled so bad. Oh, goodness gracious me, I have to stop wearing this tie, he thought. But once again, he looked at it very carefully. There's still some good fabric left. And so, he took out his scissors and started to cut. Very, very carefully. And after he had stitched it up, he now had a button and he stitched this button at the very top of his old coat. Now every time he wore that coat and came to that button, he would think of the tie and the hat and the vest and the jacket, the coat and the very kind gentleman who had given him that cloth. Now one day, the tailor went for a very long walk. And when he came back that evening, he was unbuttoning his coat when he realized he had lost that button. He was so upset. He couldn't sleep that night. But when he woke up in the morning, he remembered he had still something left. And what do you think it was? He had a story to tell. And so every time he met his friends or his relatives, he shared his story of the kind gentleman who had given him that cloth, the coat he had stitched with it, which became a jacket, and then a vest, and then a tie, a hat, and then a tie. And finally, it had become a button. And how he lost that button. And so that story was shared by so many people. I heard it too. And that's why I'm sharing it with you. So you can go ahead and share it with others. See you again soon. Bye-bye.